Hi everyone, this is Lauren, your sewing buddy, and today we're going to be finishing up my Christmas present for Jody. And here I have the sleeve mock-up. I only did the top part of the sleeve because I'm not really concerned about anything below that. I know what that shape is, but the top part of this is a little bit peculiar for sleeves. Um, so first, what I need to do before we cut into the actual fabric is clear some space for that. And again, I'm using this lovely wool suiting Super 120S English wool because Jody found it at a very good price at Fabrics R Us many years ago, and I haven't used it for anything yet, so they get it back. So once I get this all laid out, what I need to do is mark out the length for the sleeve. And of course that's much easier to do if I know where my tape measure is. There we go. So I'll get this marked down. I'm leaving a little bit of extra space just because I'm planning to do a rip and tear, which honestly is a lot easier to do from the selvage edge than it is from the fold. So let's try that again. Again, just measure down to the length that I want, add a little bit extra because this fabric does not tear evenly for some reason. I don't know if it's just the weave of the wool or what have you, but no. And the selvage is incredibly tough because of the embroidery text on it. But now I have the length I need. I just need to make sure that when it's folded in half, it's laying nice and flat. That way I'm cutting things on the grain that I want to be. And then I'm going to fold it in fourths so I can cut both sleeves at once. And I am going to fold my mock-up in half. That way the sleeves are symmetrical and I get to cut less, which my thumb will be happy with. So then with that in place, I'm just gonna pin it into the carpet here. Basically just putting a pin at each corner. I want to make sure that the folds are lined up first and then kind of pull out from there to make sure everything is laying nice and flat and even. And then I'm gonna trace that out, and remember that I need to add a little bit right here because the elbow was a little bit tight when Jody tried the mock-up on. And from there, basically just trace out that top shape, including that nice sharp corner at the edge of the arm side, because that's the finicky part about this. The way that I put the bodice together, I have to have that sharp corner, and then it comes up into the shoulder curve. And then for the wrist, I'm, for some reason, measuring twice the width that I need. Let's cut that back down. There we go. I forgot that I had folded this in half, so that's why. And then just trace up from there. And we've got our sleeve shape. Make sure it's nice and dark. And then I'll get this cut out just as soon as I can find my scissors, which always go missing. There we go. Starting at the bottom, and then, you know what, because I have an injured thumb and this material is not it's pretty slippery. So what I'm going to do is take the mock-up off and pin the material so it's not going to slip against itself. And then I think I'm actually going to use a rotary cutter for this, just to spare my thumb. I did it for the bias tape, I can do it for this. It's not going to be the end of the world. Maybe it'll actually turn out better than with scissors. Who knows? I'm not going all the way into the corner there because I can just snip that and I don't want to actually accidentally cut into the fabric itself. Then it's just following that curve all the way down and running right off the cutting mat. No harm done though, just need to scoot it up and finish that off. And there we go, 2 sleeves all cut out. Once I get these last little bits here trimmed, and for some reason this corner is fighting me. And there we go. Just need to get the pins out and untangle my pin chicken from the threads. Get all the pins out. There we go. Now I have 2 sleeves, and I just have to figure out which is the right side of the fabric. There is a side that's a little bit shinier than the other. It's sometimes difficult to tell, so I went based off of what the bodice looks like. So that way I know at least which side I used for that, and I can work based on that. Then I just need to get this pinned close so I can sew it, and then I realize that I'm again leaving the wrist open, so I don't need to pin all the way to the cuff. But starting from about there, I need to pin all the way up. And even pinning is a little bit difficult with the brace on. But you know what? We make it work. This stuff has got to get done. And then turns out that the final edge doesn't meet up quite right. So I'm going to match that up and then work my way backwards to see where the pinning went wrong. Because I know it's a matter of pinning. I just cut these with a rotary cutter. There's no way that it doesn't match. There we go. So now everything's matched up. I'm going to sew that. And then we will be back here to attach these to the bodice. Okay, and here we have the sleeves. The edges, the seam edges are still raw. I would need to hand sew for that, and I'm trying to give my thumb as much rest as possible before I do any more hand sewing. So what I need to do here is match up that corner at the edge of the arm side with the corner at the edge of the bodice arm side, and then just pin this around again with right sides together. There we go. When in doubt, look at it from another angle, because sleeves are tricky little things and you'll think you're doing it the right way when in fact it's not. So I've got a couple of pins in there, and then I'm going to go to the other side because I'm pretty sure I have some ease on this. If I do, then I'll want that pleated toward the back. So once I've got that back corner secured, I switch to the front and pin that nice and flat. Just working my way all the way around and make sure things are lined up nicely. And then you can see there where I had to trim the shoulder of the bodice. I didn't refinish that seam. So I'm going to pin those as close as I can together. That way when I sew it all together, they will most likely stay put, and then I can finish it up with some hand stitching later just to keep everything nice and tidy. And then once I'm past that seam, I am to the point where I want to start pleating. So as you can see there, I do have a good bit of ease. So I'm just gonna pleat that in and pin it down. And then keep pleating until everything lays nice and flat, at which point I can go sew this in. You'll see the bottom is still open. That's because I need to sew that from the inside rather than from the outside here. So there's my final pleat. sorry, this one's the last one. And then we are ready to sew. Well, let's go. Okay, so I've got the sleeves sewn on. I did do some hand stitching. So I did a blanket stitch around the top shoulder, and then on the bottom I folded it under and then tacked it onto the edge of the bias tape there. So on the outside I did another bit of tacking down to the inside of the bias tape, sort of an invisible stitch, so everything lays nice and smooth. And I did finish the cuff as well as fell seam the inside of the sleeves. So that's all nice and handled. I probably should have waited on that a bit longer for my thumb's sake, but again, this needs to be done. And it's not like my thumb is horribly painful or falling off or anything. It just doesn't like mornings anymore. But now we get to move on to the skirt. So once again, I'm matching up my edges, remembering to keep the selvage toward me this time, and I'm going to start with the center front skirt panel. And flip the fabric over for no particular reason. Okay. So for the skirt panel here, I'm cutting on the fold, so I'm doing 26 inches because I want the finished one to be 25, and that gives me a half-inch seam allowance at either end. The width I accidentally cut in half because I forgot that in my book I had marked the measurements for having it folded over. So no, and there I marked 25 instead of 26 because I forgot I was adding seam allowance. But for the width, I can make that up in the side panels, no problem. It may also have an additional slimming effect, so we will let that play out as it has. And then again, the bottom part of the skirt wants to be at a curve so that we don't have sharp angles. And then I realized my mistake. Draw in that seam allowance, kind of adjust the curve. And I cannot find my black scissors today, so I'm using the silver ones. Again, these have been used for opening boxes and cutting hair and paper. They were retired fabric shears, but they're still pretty sharp, so it's not terrible. I just like my black ones better. There is our front skirt panel. And then I have to decide, is there enough in the part here to make the next panel? The answer is no. So that'll probably be for the hood. Now let's get this straightened back out, and we can cut the back panel, which is longer than the front. Otherwise I could have just done them both at the same time, but because of the design of the skirt, it's not like a smooth curve that goes longer. It's like the front panel is shorter and then everything else is long. So that'll be fun with figuring out how to hem that. But for now, I just need to cut the back panel. So again, this is much longer than the front. So I'm gonna mark that out. Actually get the width correct on this one, so that I don't have to make up for double the width in the side panels, because that would, I think, make them wider at the top than the bottom, if not at least more rectangular overall. I'm using the ruler there just to make sure that it's proper measurement and nice and straight. I don't know why I insist on straight back waistbands, because I know a lot of times they are curved, but I guess I feel better that way. Then I've got my length marked out for the outer edge, and I'm just gonna cut between those points, starting at the waist, and cut down at the diagonal, mostly straight, once I figure out the right angle to attack it from. There we go. Because, again, I sew much straighter than I cut, I'm not worried about it being perfectly straight. I'm just gonna adjust for that during the sewing process. I maybe went a little bit long there, but that's okay, because this panel is supposed to be very long. And then I'm just, again, creating that curve so the corners sit nice and flat once it's actually on a person. And then for the side panels, this is not going to cut it because of that extra width I need. So I'm gonna have to use up the very last of this yardage. So I guess that turns out Jody bought exactly the right amount for this project, so that was fortuitous. It's a little bit short from that side, but somehow this side is actually a bit longer. So what I'm going to do, I think, is keep the front edge of the side panels a little bit shorter, and then because the back edge would come off at an angle, I can lengthen that and make sure that meets up with the back panel length. So I'm marking out the waistline first, just making sure, again, that I add in that extra bit for what I left off of the front. Seeing how long this actually is, which it should work out pretty well actually. And then the side panels I don't want to be too wide, but again, I do want to be able to add that length so that they match up in the back with the back panel, which kind of makes the curve on this interesting because it's almost going the wrong way, but you know what, we'll make it work. And you'll notice I've left the selvage on for the front edges. It's just because that is a very solid selvage, so I'd like to, rather than trim it off, I'm going to use that rolled under itself for the seam there. That also lets me know exactly how wide of a seam I need, which, hey, it turns out it's about that 1/2 inch I normally use anyway. So now with these all nicely cut and laid out, what I need to do is make some pockets. And I don't have a general pockets pattern that I use, I just sort of rough out the shape big enough to hold cell phone, wallet, and whatever Jody might need to put into a pocket, especially their hands, because they do have bigger hands than me. So once I've got that cut, what I need to do is make sure I get the angle on them right. And because I do want these to sit at an angle so that things aren't just falling out of them all the time. But I've got that nice straight line to look at there. And this is approximately where the pocket will sit on the side seam there. So now with those cut, I need to do another pair, because I do need 4 panels of pocket to make 2 entire pockets, and these are going to be French seamed because I don't like raw edges. It's not a lined skirt, so I don't want to have anything fraying on the inside. This wool does fray quite a bit if you leave it unattended, so it's very important to me that everything be nicely finished. But with those done, now I can lay out my skirt panels once I clear the floor a little bit. So there's the back panel and the front panel, and then this is where the pockets are going to be attached, or at least one half of the set of pockets. So I'm gonna lay those out and pin them in place. Yes, one of them is upside down, and I will fix that later, I promise, but I haven't quite realized that is the case yet. Regardless though, here we have the front, well, that's the back panel. Here's the back panel with the pockets on the side, and then the front panel with its pockets. And then I have to figure out which way to sew these together so I can French seam the edges. Turns out the pocket seams face each other. That way when I turn it inside, it's all nice and clean. So, and I just need to get these pinned in place. And you'll notice I have fixed the one that was incorrectly applied, so that all the pockets are now facing the proper direction and can be pinned together with ease. Then once that is done, I will go sew, and there you go. There's the nicely French seamed pockets. I also sewed up that final seam. I haven't finished that seam yet. It still needs top stitching, which again I'm doing in place of fell stitching for most of this, where I can get away with it, just because that saves my thumb. And yeah, I think for the pocket itself, what I need to do is just fold over this edge here, and that'll give it a nice clean finish, I think. I'll figure it out. So now that that has been figured out, what I need to do is put in supports for the pockets. Because normally there is a little twill tape or something that goes up toward the waistband so that the pocket isn't just held up by that one seam. This will also keep the pockets from kind of flopping all over the place, kind of keep them all facing in the proper direction. And I'm using more of the lining fabric for this. This was actually the first sleeve mock-up, which did not end well, which is why we had the second one out of that lovely blue polyester trash. I'm just gonna mark a 2-inch width here, because I feel like that's going to be plenty wide enough. And then once I get that cut, what I'm going to do is treat it like I would bias tape. So I'm going to fold the edges in toward the center, and then fold that in half, and then stitch that down. And then the way it's going to sit is like so. So it's just gonna support that bit of bag in case Jody wants to carry anything heavy. And then once I've got those all situated, they're not perfectly centered, but that's okay. Next step is to apply the bodice, or attach the skirt to the bodice. So I'm going to do these with wrong sides together because this is going to be another French seam. I feel like that's going to be more stable for the waistband and give a slightly better look. So I'm going to start at the back edge, because that's where the zipper's going to go. That can give us a nice clean straight line, and just get to pinning. And with all of that pinned in place, the next step is to stitch that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and then flip it out. And there you see that nice French seam here. Next, I get to figure out my cincher, so that's going to be fun. That means I get to move into this lovely, mostly plastic material. Again, this one, because of its synthetic nature, is the furthest away from the skin, because ew. And you can see in a past project it was not cut at a very straight grain, but luckily that's not what we need for this. I just need to double check the measurements for the cincher pieces. Okay. And now get those drafted and cut out. So I'm doing a 6-inch line there. That doesn't look straight. Let's try that again. Okay. Better? Question mark? And then once I know the width that I need, the point tapers down, so I need to subtract 1.5 inches from either end. That way it stays centered. And then I'm just going to draw a little bit of a curve up to that point. And there's our front cincher piece. And then once we get that cut out, which is kind of a struggle because this is very slippery synthetic material, so I'm gonna get a good grip on this side before I start cutting here. And also feel badly for these poor shears having to go through this polyester nightmare. There we go. See, it wasn't too bad. Next, I get to cut a lining for these because I do want these to be very stable. Can I get a lining out of the first mock-up? No, not anymore. Okay. That means I have to go back to the lining yardage, which is totally fine. This is some strange, vaguely stretchy, vaguely shiny cotton poly blend that I'm using for this. I'm just gonna trace that lightly. It might not be exact, but I can always trim it down later. Okay. And then once I get that cut, I just need to cut some interfacing because I do want this to be a nice stable cincher. I don't want it to be something that just flops around outside the dress and bunches up and looks weird. It should lay nice and flat. There's those, and then moving on to the back panels. Let me see how these are gonna look first. Oh yeah. I might need to do some extra folding over here, just so there's a space between them, because that's the whole point. But otherwise, yeah, that's the look I wanted. Great. So now for the back panels. Yeah, I can probably take a whole 2 inches off of these, but I'll have Jody try it on altogether before I make any big decisions on that. So for the back, I have the same piece here. Again, make sure that everything is nicely lined up. And then draft out what I need for this when I make sure I have enough space to actually cut. So this is going to be the same height as the bigger edge of our front panel, but I think this I'm actually going to do on a slight curve just to kind of point out the waist there. And luckily the rest is totally straight, so just out to the edge there and straight up. And bringing in good old Garfield to draw me a straight line, because again my plastic ruler is just a little bit too short. now that it's been snapped in half. There we go. Almost a perfect rectangle, except for that one curved edge. And I'm just gonna cut off all that excess because I would really like to get through this material quickly. And I know that I have more lining material sitting under this while I'm cutting. It's okay, I'm being very careful about which layers I'm cutting into. And then, once again, when that's all done, I need to cut into the lining. Oh, I still need to trim up this edge too, because this one I don't really want to deal with the selvage on. There we go. Okay. So for the lining on this, again, we're using that same lining from before. I'm gonna clean up some of that cabbage and then lay this out, trace it. You'll notice I'm not wearing my brace for a lot of these. That's because I found that trying to sew against the brace was actually hurting my thumb more than just getting my sewing done and then letting my hand rest in the brace. So that's why I'm not all braced up. That's probably also why I'm still having to wear my brace, but it's worth it. So then with the lining for this piece all cut, once I trim this very small edge off, I will be ready to move on to interfacing. Except that then I noticed that one piece from the back panel somehow had a rough edge on it, and I didn't catch that before. So I just need to cut another pair and then all will be well. So now that that's been corrected, I finally get to cut the interfacing. I'm going to use the lining pieces because they are more easy to adhere to the interfacing while I'm tracing. Just need to scoot this all the way up to the edge because I want to use as little as possible, of course. I could probably use that top part there, but then I'd have to cut one and then the other, whereas this way I can cut out all 4 pieces that I need at one time. So I'm just going to trace very carefully and neatly. Deal with that edge there where I haven't pressed these pieces, even though I definitely should, because who's got time for an ironing board? Then just need to get these cut out. And this is a fusible interfacing. I could have done a sew-in, but I prefer fusible for things like this because then I don't have to have stitches on the outside at all, or worry about it shifting around. It just sort of lays flat because it's stuck to the lining material. I just have a little bit to trim off here. And then for the second piece, just do a quick little cut. And that tiniest little bit of space in between them. But the back edge of this went right up to the edge of the interfacing, so one less thing to cut. And now I just need to get these all paired up with their buddies, and then I'll press them together, and then we'll do some flat lining. So here I have my fashion fabric pieces, and then my interface lining pieces. I'm going to lay these out with wrong sides together so that they're all facing the way that they will be facing. Essentially, I'm creating one piece of fabric out of what is technically 3, but right now only 2. I'm going to put a pin in the center so that nothing shifts around. And once this is all built, I'm going to do a double roll around the top and bottom. That way it has, again, a nice clean edge, which we all know I love so much. And while I'm getting these pinned together, I'd like to invite you to like, comment, subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Friday. There may be a break coming up soon because there may be a baby soon. There will be a baby soon. So I'm gonna take a little bit of time off just to adjust to that, but then I should be back after a couple of weeks, I hope. I'll let you know how things are going. But yeah, for now, just pinning these and getting them ready for basting. And here I've basted them, I've sewn the front and back together, and then I've done that rolled edge around. Now I just have to figure out how I want it to be placed. So I know the back needs to line up exactly with the zipper opening here. So I'm going to pin that first and see if this is the right height for it. Because I'm putting it so that the bottom edge lines up with the waist seam. And then I'm going to put a couple more pins in the side just to keep everything going straight across. We'll see if that works out. Just to keep everything nice and stable. And then on the front, let's see here. That sits a little bit higher than I want. So I think I'm going to take these out and then sit it a little bit lower because I want this to be closer to the waistband here. So probably 1.5 inches to 2 inches on the back, past where the waistline is. So now once again, I'm just gonna pin that in place. It's a little bit trickier because the skirt is a little bit more full. So pinning that bottom edge doesn't quite work out. Instead, I'm going to pin up at the very bottom of the waistline, and then again another pin from the top, just making sure that's staying as flat as possible. And then see where we're at here. Yeah, that's much closer to what I imagined, so yay! Alright, so now I just need to get this attached, get the other one attached, and we shall see how far we need to fold those in after Jody tries this on again. And I realized that something that would help with Jody trying this on is if I actually installed the zipper, which I can finally do at this point, because all the layers that are going to be caught under the zipper are here. So the only zipper I had that was long enough is this purplish pink one, but hopefully that'll be okay. It's cute. Make sure that staple is safely stored. And then I'm going to open this up. Once again, this is not an invisible zipper, this is just a standard zipper. Just need to double check which way I need it facing so that when it's turned over, it's doing the right thing. And I'm folding down that top tab just to make sure the zipper does go all the way to the top. I know a lot of times you leave that and then do a hook at the top, but that's not what I'm feeling today. I don't think I've ever actually... No, I have done that once for a garment, but I prefer this way. I'm just going to pin all the way down and get that stitched on with a zipper foot. Okay, and here we have the zipper fully installed. It's a little bit, there's like a 1/4 inch difference between the height of the cincher panels, but that's totally okay. I am going to put boning in the very edge here because there will be eyelets and lacing, and I want it to continue to sit nice and flat. So got one piece of boning there, another one here, and I've had Jody try it on, so I know how much I need to fold in the edges, and it happens to be just enough to make a nice little boning channel. So set those aside for now. this is what I'm using for the eyelets, because this will save me some hand sewing, which when I'm healing from Angry Thumb is very important. So now for the edges of this, I do want them to be able to tuck around. However, because the eyelets are specifically spaced, I have to pin where I want that center one to be and then cut as close to that next eyelet as I can and hope that that is going to stay put for me. It's a very difficult thing to pin. It doesn't really want to cooperate, and I'll probably just have to stitch that down by hand at the end anyway, but I'm going to put in the effort for now. Okay. And then make a little bit of adjustment there to the depth of it. Cut again just as close to that eyelet as I possibly can. Try to tuck it down underneath the edge of the boning channel. Which of course it doesn't want to stay, but you know, we do our best. And something I didn't realize about this eyelet trim when I picked it up from the bargain basement at Costume College was that it had little rhinestones at the base of each eyelet. So normally I would have done the eyelet trim underneath, but because of those, I decided that it needs to be on top and visible. And now that's all done. I found a nice cream colored ribbon. I can change that for something else later. But now we're ready to create the hood. So I am only attaching the hood to part of the shoulder, probably about 6 inches. I need to see what material I have that can accommodate the hood, because again, we've used up all the yardage for this fabric. So I am working off of scraps now. Probably not that. Yes. Okay. So this should be enough to create a hood. I just have to figure out how to shape the hood so that it will sit on, sit out so that it only attaches at those points on the shoulder. According to my book, I need, it said 21, the measurement was 14 and a half, but I went to 21 3/4 because I added half again because I want it to be sort of a flowy drapey hood. So now with that marked, I'm going to cut off the excess and then have myself a think. And I think what I need to do is actually flip this over and then cut up that fold, because the angled part is going to be the back of the hood, so the folded part here is going to be front because that's nice and straight. So then I just need to cut the rounded part here and then straighten out back a little bit. I don't want to take too much width out. I think I just want to make sure that this isn't going down at an angle like it is right here. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch that together and pin it onto the dress and see, because maybe I want to pleat it all like that, or I don't know. We'll figure it out. Yeah, it's an experiment. And hey, look, it turned out okay. So there's the stitched on hood. I didn't actually do any pleating, but now we're ready to have Jody try this on and see what they think. I'm really excited. Just got it safety pinned there. You just need to stitch that. And then it's got that keyhole effect in the back so that Jody can still get in and out. And when the hood is up, it's a cool little detail. Okay, so the dress is finished. I've done Jody's hair and makeup, and now they're about to see what it all looks like together. Come on out. How's it feel?
It's good. I like it.
Yes, it has pockets. Let me see the back. The zipper doesn't match it, but that's the zipper I
had. Pop of pink on the back for the zipper.
Is it everything you wanted for your Christmas?
Yes.
Merry Christmas.
Nice.